So when do you really start worrying about personalization? I mean, which stage is that?
I would say it starts day one, right? Like you need to know who your customer is. And again, there are cheap ways to personalize, right? You can merge docs, you can literally like send three different versions of your email on MailChimp if you need to. But it's making sure that you have that level of like measurement to understand if you sent literally you could type up three different, and I've done this, you could type three different emails, send it out to your customers, figure out which ones have the best click through, or figure out which ones actually had, yeah, and put a promo code on it, put a different promo code on each one, and figure out which one actually your customers respond to the best. I don't think you need to build complex algorithms day one, but I definitely think you have to have personalization in mind, especially if you're building a product that that isn't a be all product for everybody. If you have a product that's for a niche customer, I think you better believe that day one you need to build in kind of that thought of how am I going to serve that customer better every single day. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't wait until you're building gigantic, you know, machine learning data and having to hire 10 data science to analyze the data that you get. Like there are different ways that you can kind of iterate day after day. I remember when I started one of my startups, I literally emailed like 1,000 people, and the first email I got like 6 responses back. I was like, well, I don't know if that's good. I don't know if that's bad. So the next time I emailed 500 people the same one, and I modified the email, and you saw the second email B that I modified, and I actually it wasn't like dear ex customer, it was actually dear Christina, dear David, dear Ryan, dear Brian. That one got like 50 responses back. So I said, okay, no one wants to be called dear customer. And this was like eons ago. This was like 15 years ago when I did this.
yeah, thank you. So I have a second question as well. So we are an early stage company, like 4 people. We're kind of scaling our product right now. So far, I as a CEO has worked on the product, but we are getting ready for first product hire. So what's your recommendation to really go about the first person who will handle the product?
I get this question a lot. So, as you know, as Jessica mentioned, I come from both the GM and PM background. And there's been people who've said, I really want a pure play PM. I always go back. I'm like, what does that mean? Like, I don't know what that means. You don't want me to think about the business. You don't want me to think about the customer. You just want me to build the product. Is that what you mean? So the way I think about kind of hiring, like especially very early stage startup level, is you have to hire a PM that either one and it kind of depends on what your startup is. Like, do you need somebody with very specific skill sets? Like, you're going after this specific market, payments, for example. You would want somebody who's worked at Square or Clover or whatever before. But if you're saying like, hey, I need to figure out product market fit. I need to figure out I need somebody to write user stories one day. I need to figure out somebody who's willing to talk to customers the next day. I think what's really great is people who do have a very strong kind of technical background. By technical, I don't mean like you're only going to hire engineers, but people who could think, who have really good sense of like understanding big concepts and distilling it down to individual user stories and individual kind of questions, hypotheses. I go back to this, right? Because you're as a startup, you're probably not going to get it right. You may, but you're probably going to go through multiple iterations and you're probably going to go through multiple features before you're like, oh, this one makes the most sense, or this is the one that. So, long story short, I think you'd like really strong product people early on, especially if it's your product hire. I think you have to hire somebody with a really strong business sense, very good intuition, right? You don't have a lot of money. I'm saying hopefully you'll have a lot more, but like right now, especially if you're a 4-person startup, I'm assuming you don't have a lot of money. You really need somebody who's willing to roll up their sleeves, talk to customers one day, write user stories the next day, be the QA person the next day. That's what I would, and especially if you're still in that phase. If you're a little bit more like, I know I'm going to build this niche product. I know it's like highly specialized. I would probably then go recruit at whoever you don't think is doing it well, go take one of their product managers.
I have three questions for you. First one is when you have a new user, they just sign up on your website. You don't know anything about them other than probably their name and an email address. How, if and how you personalize for them.
We typically don't. I mean, that is the hardest customer to personalize for is when you don't know anything about them. So what we do is we make a lot of evergreen kind of landing pages. We try to we try to make it seasonal. We know that even if a customer, we don't know anything about them, but you're coming to us closer to Christmas, we're still going to serve you up Christmas cards. We're still going to, serve you up anything that's blue, that's red and green and gold. Like we do our best. And that's, the moment you land on our site is the moment we start collecting data about you so that, and data in like where you click, how you respond, how do we make the site easier? How do we make the site better? We don't try to like figure out like where you live, what your address is. Like it's not we don't think it's in a creepy way. It's more of just like how do we learn? And a lot of this is driven by like, again, algorithms on the back end. So it's not a human being trying to figure out or trying to stalk you. That is probably the biggest challenge that we have. Like when we don't know anything about a customer, that we don't know how they came in, they don't know how they found us. That's always really, really challenging. But we figure that there's universal truths at that time. Like people come here to buy holiday cards. People come here because it's Mother's Day. Like what are the best gifts? So right now, like if you look at our site, our homepage, that's one of the things that I'm responsible for. It's everything's Mother's Day, and so we assume that not everybody on our site comes and is looking for a Mother's Day gift. We know that, but we know that a lot of people are, and so we just try our best.
Second question is related to your answer. You mentioned feedback loops in your talk. Are these automated feedback loops, or do you have human intervention somehow?
They're automated feedback loops. Okay. Yeah, we want to make sure. Again, photos in general are very kind of sensitive and a lot of privacy issues around them, as the woman in the front had alluded to. So we really try to be good about, like it's one thing when a machine looks at it, it's another thing when humans are like digging through your account, and so that's not something that we do. I mean, I don't think I can comment any further, but for the most part, almost everything that we do is algorithmically driven.
Okay. But what I meant, so that's partly answered my question, but what I also meant was once you get more data, do you have like data scientists retraining the model, or is it a feedback loop that automatically gets a new feedback and then you don't even
It depends. It depends on if we have models built out for it, then it's automatic. And if we don't have models built out for it, then we go like, here's a new set, like especially if it's a new feature, and we are putting new instrumentation and we have to start building models for it, that's when the data scientists come in. So we look at, and what data scientists essentially do is like looking for patterns, right? Like either unique user behavior patterns or generic user behavior patterns that they classify to users. So we know that people who log in from 7 to 10 p.m. typically like red mugs. So, typically when we think about that, like how do we serve up more red mugs to people who come between 7 to 10 p.m.? I mean, it's very much like how Netflix knows I stop watching TV at 9 p.m. They factor that into their model, I'm sure.
And the last question is for personalization, how do you structurally organize the personalization team? Is it by product? Is it by user segment? Is it by category? What have you find most effective?
It's very much built into our DNA at Shutterfly. So how we think about personalization is our marketing is personalized. Our CEO is like we need different vehicles to be able to talk to different customers. Don't give me one blowhorn to talk to everybody. That doesn't work. We also have a data science team. We also have a data analytics team. We have product managers that really, try to understand and work with third-party vendors to really understand what products we need to serve up. I would say it permeates across the entire organization. It's not just one team that does it. And I think the downfall of one team that does it is marketing spends all this time personalizing, and you land them on a generic site. So it's not great for lifecycle management of our customers. Mm-hmm.
A very, very specific personalization question. We have a product. How much of it is it a taboo to ask the gender of the person? So based on the gender, we kind of can give different voice responses saying that, Ryan is free now. He is going to start something now. We can use the word he or she in the responses if we know the gender.
Yeah.
How much of it is a taboo, at the very start, tell me if this person is a male or a female.
Um, it's hard to answer that question. I will say that typically people it depends on what they want. Like I'll give you an example. Like Stitch Fix, I sat there and I was more than happy to fill out your 10-question questionnaire, 20-question questionnaire, because I want to make sure that the clothes that you send me fit, right? So it really depends on what that is for the customer. Like, is there really any value to them for them giving you your gender? If you're like, hey, I just want to make sure that I don't call someone Mr. or Mrs., which did happen to me at a dealership before, a car dealership before. I think it's a hard question to say unless it's like, hey, I need to know if you're a Mr. or Miss because I'm selling you a specific product that only women would use, so if your question is, should you ask the customer? I would say I would grab a group of 30, 40, 50 people together and be like, is this offensive to anybody? Like, does this really make a difference in your product? If the answer is yes, then yeah, you should absolutely ask. If there's any way that you can deduce that somebody's a female or a male, I would find a way to do that. But I think if you're a startup and you don't want to offend people, right? Like you don't want to call Mrs. Whatever Rodriguez or Mr. You probably you have to figure out how sensitive that topic is. And I would say like err on the side of conservatism. Don't err on the side, especially if you think it's going to be offensive.
Awesome.
The ones that are most valuable, I think, to us is typically historical behavior. So people are creatures of habit, and so order history is very telling as to what people really like. We look at our customers and kind of new trial and repeat customers. We figure out who's been here before, what have they looked at. Typically, if somebody in my mind, like if somebody here has come and has bought photo books 5 years in a row, and what we do is, hey, like how do we test them to get to try a new product? We'll test them, but after like a couple times, if that test fails, we're not going to keep on trying to shove cards down a person's neck, a person's throat. You test in kind of as non-offensive as we can, but you realize that if somebody keeps on coming back here every single year for the same product, capitalize on that and be like, hey, you want 2 photo books this year? you want buy one get one free of a photo book this year? Like you really just hone in when you realize that your customers really has found kind of an attachment to your product.
So specific to developing an MVP, which I think is one of the most exciting and kind of daunting parts of like launching a new product. Mm-hmm. You listed several great kind of resources to use, usertesting.com, focus groups. Could you walk through, in your experience, like what has worked well in terms of sequencing? Do you typically start with a user group? Do you start with usertesting.com? And what like lessons, pitfalls have you seen in this kind of MVP pre-coding or pre-production phase?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it depends on where you are at the stage of your product. Is it ideation? What I find really, really super important, actually, when we do usability testing, is when we we can let that person interact with our product. And it may not need to be production ready. It may be a prototype. It may just be UI mocks. But I think at the end of the day, like it's very hard to be like, do you like this? Unless you're really like, I have no business yet. I don't really know what product I'm going to launch. I'm just going to test ideas out. I think it's really good to be able to build out beta version or V1 of your product as scrappy as you can build it, right? And preface your user group with, this is not the final product. I mean, this is beta. This is before beta. This is V1. Please bear with us. And typically people are very forgiving, right? Like I don't know how long Gmail was in beta for, but it was in beta for a long time. And so typically when you preface people with, I'm an entrepreneur. This is the product that I've launched. I really appreciate your time. Any honest feedback would be great. Please don't be afraid to give me really direct and critical feedback because I want to make this product better. People are very receptive to that. And so in your question, to answer your question directly, in sequencing, I would, unless you're trying to find a business, which it might be different, but if you have a business in mind, you have a product in mind, I would rapid prototype it as fast as I can, as cheap as I can, get it in front of 30 people. If you have 1 out of 30 love it, I don't know that you may have a great product on your hands. If you have, a significant portion of that, or majority of that population, or significant portion of that population, enough of that population, and think about representative. If you're saying like, hey, this product is a niche product, and I really only want 10% of the people in this world to even know about it or use it, and then maybe you don't need 9 out of 10 people to love it. Maybe you actually just need the person, your target person. It could be that, that person sitting in that seat. If that person loves it, and that person loves it, and that person loves it, you may only need 3 out of 30. So it really depends on the actual product. But I will say rapid prototyping, I think, is pretty key. I don't think you can go in usability testing or user testing and just speak to people. I think it goes in one ear, goes out the other. Did I answer your question? Okay.
One last question. She's still around afterwards in case you guys have other questions.
Can you share how at Shutterfly you go through product discovery process at a high level, your product planning, road mapping, whatever you...
Sure. So I think road mapping...
Has it changed over time?
Yeah, I think it has. So one of the kind of disciplines that we try at Shutterfly, and we are a company with a finite set of resources, and I would say most companies are like that. Some bigger behemoths might not be, but we are definitely a company with a finite set of resources, and we really, really, really have to believe that every product that we launch, I feel like the question that you have to ask is, will you bet your house on it, right? Because you can make mistakes, and mistakes are fine to make, but you can't make that many mistakes when you're a company of our size. There's reputational risk. There's, customer anger risk. There's really, really nasty email risk, right? So the way we think about it is like, what are the big rocks? Like, and when we classify some of our projects, like, what are the things that we absolutely, absolutely need to do? Whether it's platform hygiene, whether it's, just production support. We think about that and we say, every year, that number is anywhere between X and X%, and just set that aside so you know what you have to play with. How we think about it is we count typically, like, last year we had X number of engineers. Each engineer is worth this many person months, and we say this is the pool that we're playing with. How would we divvy up this pool? So we look at projects, and the way we look at projects, a lot of it is, are there some projects that are super strategic to the company that may not pay off in the short term, but we really need to invest in them because 5 years down the line, this is exactly what customers are going to want. They may not know it now, but we know that 5 years down the line. I don't think 5 years ago someone said, I want you to put my photo on this mug and have me never think about it again and just send it to my house. I don't, and there's always that classic example of Ford and kind of the faster horse. But we think about projects and like big rocks. Like, what are the big rocks that we absolutely have to get done? It's existential to the company. Then we go back, and that could be whatever. I'm making numbers up, but I could say that's 60%, 70% or 60% of our roadmap. And then there's always this small bucket of just really like very innovative kind of thinking, like pushing the boundary, um, pushing ourselves essentially. Like, yeah, this may suck, and yeah, this may not work out, but it's cheap, and we're going to do it really quickly, and we're going to fail fast. And so there's always, I feel like, especially maybe if you're not a startup, when you have kind of decent growth already, you got to still know that if you don't innovate and you don't dedicate like a pretty significant portion of your time to innovation, that someone else is going to eat your lunch. So the way, I mean, and I would say, like, at some of my startups before, we typically put 70% into kind of core platform, and we did 30% of innovation. And that number either went up or down depending on how well we did the last year and how successful those innovations are. So what I find is, like, if you have, one kind of breakthrough product, it's easier to invest next year on other breakthrough products. And so I would say that there is always X percentage of your roadmap that you need to save for just the maintenance of your systems, of your customer service issues, or whatever. And a good number is it probably, if you're looking for a number, is probably, depending on, again, this is super broad and generalized, but I would say 20-30% of your roadmap probably needs to, if you don't have a product that has existed over a couple of years, 20-30% of your roadmap, make sure that you actually know that you're listening to customers, taking their feedback. The one thing I will say, and I will say that this is very common kind of everywhere I worked, is there's always a vocal minority. There's always a vocal minority who write in, and I am actually very grateful for people who write in and give feedback to us, but always know that that may be a vocal minority. So use intuition, use science, use data to either act on it or understand that this may be one irate person, and they may have had a bad day and they're taking it out on you. So I will say that take that 20 to 30% kind of with a grain of salt, and but definitely I will say there's probably maintenance, core, and innovation.
Thank you.
Oh. Thank you.
Cool. So thanks so much. She'll, I believe, still be around.
I will be around.
Okay, great. So any additional questions, unanswered questions, please feel free to go up to her afterwards. Now is time for shout outs. There's a t-shirt here and already a volunteer.
So the company is Chrome Studio, and we create images that sell. And so we use artificial intelligence and crowdsourcing to do the image that she was showing on her cup. So that image actually comes to us, done about 1 million of them, of customers like her, like yours, but they take it in their kitchen or in their living room, and then we make recommendations to them. So we talk about personalization. So we'll make a recommendation to them of a classic background, of a creative background, sunset or a field, or a seasonal background, Mother's Day or Easter. And then they'll say, that's the background that I want, and then we'll make that image for them. And so personalization is quite interesting. We have thousands of possible designs. And the question is, how do we make a recommendation to them to make it personal for them? And we use artificial intelligence, but just you were asking a question about asking someone whether it's a male or a female. You can tell that pretty easily if you have an image. You can tell a lot about them. But initially, we would do a distance between two images. So if you ordered, a white background, and we had someone else that looked like you, we would then offer them a white background. But we realized that if you were wearing a red shirt and that other person was wearing a white shirt, the delta wouldn't be very similar. And so we found that posing was actually a very good indicator of what image should be personalized. And so if you have a particular pose and someone else had that pose and they order a background and they gave it a 5 stars, we're going to show you that one. And that works really well with babies, and it works really well with people and so on. And that's one way to do personalization. So when you think of a personalization, use ML, but then try to figure out whether or not the ML is getting thrown off. And so we use still the distance between two images, but that's a smaller K. The pose is the K that we use for personalization.
Hello, my name is Avnish, and I'm a founder CEO of a startup which has built an engagement and fun measurement platform for schools. So essentially, a platform goes in the classrooms as well as the school staff uses it, and they do activities which essentially, build the classroom engagement. And as a part of the engagement, we get lots and lots of photos uploaded to the platform, and essentially we monetize engagement for the schools as well. So we're kind of early stage right now. We have raised some money and we are looking for anybody who can handle product as well as the UX people. So if anybody is interested in it, please talk to me and we should get to the next level. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else?
Hi, I'm Rodrigo. The name is not so easy, but I think the company's name is going to be easier. It's Birdie. We're creating a company to help people in their product research journey, focusing on those people who really cannot research well using, for example, Reddit and Quora and Amazon like a heavy user. So the idea is to make it even the fight for the consumer against the e-commerce algorithms. And we're just releasing a small experiment, which is a bot that is going to ask you a few questions and try to recommend really relevant products for you. We learned in the first slide from Kristie that she really likes to research, but there are people who just cannot do it. So they suffer from anxiety about going to lots of websites, and we really want to help those people. About becoming a mom, there's also an interesting segment because that's a change in your life where you start to research products that are not part of your habit. So this is an interest segment that we're trying to help. And right now we're focusing on electronics. So we're looking for people who are actually looking for new TV or smartphone or laptop or headphones to try. So if you're interested in helping us learn more, just go to ask.birdie.ai, and there's an experiment there. You can help us learn more and build a greater product. Thank you. Birdie. Birdie. Yeah, Birdie. Ask.birdie. Yeah.
Thank you.
Ryan from Adobe. If anybody has any experience in security, we're looking for some product people in security, and doubly so if you have any interest in moving to Austin.
Yes. Cool. Then just run back up to the front. Let's wrap it up this time. I wanted to thank Kristie again. And then next month, quick shout out for next month. We do these the first Wednesday of every month. So the first Wednesday of June, we're hosting Anne Raimundi. She is currently a board member at Asana, formerly board member of SendGrid, and was SVP of operations at Zendesk. She's incredibly impressive, has been around the Valley, has done product operations and a whole slew of other jobs in between. So please come out for that. Thank you guys.